Hello everybody, my name is Mathis, and with me today is the DM of Lost Initiative and co-creator of Lost Initiative, my good friend Scott, also known as Daleric on Twitter. What's up, Scott? How's it going, man?
Not bad,
Hanging in there, as
hanging
you
in
do.
there, living life, all that stuff.
Hell yeah. As I'm sure a lot of you Lost Initiative fans know by now, or even if you're just a passerby on the channel, that we are starting up a second Lost Initiative show on Thursdays at 6 p.m. PST. It was announced a week ago, I think, or so by now, and then recently a character creation video went live where myself, Scott, and the three other players, Maggie, Jesse, and Krendor, all got together and made our characters. And if you don't know, we're playing Star Wars with the Edge of the Empire rule system. And a lot of people who watch the show have an idea as to how D&D works. D&D is it seems complicated from the front, but a lot of people know, like, when you roll a 20 on a 20-sided die, it's really good. Small numbers are really bad, and you can kind of go learn as you go, or at least have a basic understanding as to how things work within the system. We work on, like, a grid, and you move characters. It's pretty simple. With Star Wars Edge of the Empire, when we started looking at the system and deciding that we want to play the system and then obviously making characters with people, it became very clear very quickly that this system is not like D&D in almost every way. There are similarities, of course, but the fact that it uses a proprietary dice system with symbols instead of numbers, it's a lot more narrative driven, there's a lot more interpretation when you look at the dice. We thought it prudent to create a video explaining what the dice do, how the rules work, so those who come to the show can at least have a basic understanding as to what's going on. And I know Scott, in particular, I've been telling him, I hope you're studying, Scott, because we're going to need to make this video soon. So what do you think of the system overall, Scott, as the more you've read it, as a big D&D person, someone who's played a lot of rule systems over the 30 some odd years you've been alive? What do you think of the Fantasy Flight system?
I love it. It's so two things stand out. One, it reminds me very much of both like a White Wolf system, World of Darkness, and of GURPS, which GURPS is the first ever tabletop I ever played. It's my passion. I never can convince my friends to play it with me because, well, you suck. But I love the system. And then because of the way it's built, the way the characters are made, and then continues to develop as time goes before you defend yourself. And then two, it's way more story driven, which the only other system I ever played that was as narrative as this one, as opposed to like rules based overall, was this like anime game that I played. And maybe it was just the people that I was playing with, but God, the game is awful.
Was that
experience is terrible?
Was that Exalted?
I don't remember. Actually, Exalted does sound familiar.
Because I never got to play with you, but I did have a core rule book that was Exalted.
No. It wasn't with you. It was my buddy Neil and a couple of other people, and we were like mid to late teens.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
It was a long time ago, and I was like, God, this is terrible. But so the way of the character development and build and development, and then story driven.
So what you're saying is that my secret plan all along to get you to play the Sailor Moon RPG system with me is just never going to happen.
No. It'll actually, I think this was your secret plan all along. I was literally talking about this a few days ago. I was like, I think the only reason why he had me do the 5e game was to get me comfortable in a camera to do a Star Wars game.
I don't know. That's a bit presumptuous, but I can neither confirm nor deny that there was at least some hope in my mind that this was going to work out in some way.
Was it A New Hope?
Oh, hey.
Two on the nose.
So good. So I've gone ahead and I've bullet pointed all the things we want to talk about. We're going to go over some of the basics, and on screen, I'm going to, in post, kind of bring up the things so you can see what we're talking about so you guys aren't completely lost. But for me and Scott, we're just going to be going via memory and via physical book right in front of us. So the first thing, I think, and the most simple thing for people to grasp is character stats and how they're generated. And I think one of the best things to do is talk about D&D real quick and how stats are generated there. On a most basic level, you pick your race. Your race gives you bonuses to one of your stats. And then you, for the most part, roll stats randomly, and then you allocate your points that way, correct?
Yep. Roll stats randomly and pass them out, or use a point buy system and you buy them. Whatever, same difference.
Exactly. So
it breaks down into, there are 6 attributes in D&D, and it's very similar in this system. 6 attributes. Go ahead.
No, go right. I was gonna say. So go ahead and let's go over the stats and let us know how they're attained and what the stats do.
Well, how they're attained depends directly on race for this one. So in D&D, you buy numbers and race or modifiers affect it. For this game, you have sets opening stats from the get-go based off your race. So one of the iconic races, the two iconic races are human and droid. And what's nifty about them is that their stats are even across the board. Humans have 2s across the board. Droids have 1 across the board. And that's just to show that they are like, they don't fit into any molds. They can be pretty much anything. According to systems, but something like say a Wookiee is significantly tougher, stronger, but not necessarily as strong-willed. So you'll see modifiers based off of those, based off of that. So they're attained by your race alone, and then you can buy them immediately at character creation by spending points. Going into XP, you have so many allotted at the character creation, you can spend across your entire character sheet, but you can improve there. But other than character creation, you actually cannot improve your attributes barring like some miraculous event or at the end of a talent tree. At the very end of your talent tree, which we're going to get to shortly, you can actually buy up a point there. So more or less what you start with, you stick with, barring very few exceptions.
Yep. So go over
Anything
each stat. I was say go over to go through each stat and just talk about. Oh, he can't hear me. Hello, I'm entertaining on my own. Not that I'm saying that I haven't done this before. I like to talk to myself.
There we go.
That's hey, well, welcome back.
Logitech back for you.
That's fine. I was gonna say go over each stat and just briefly talk about what each stat does. And that's it. What the 6 stats are. Go for it.
Sure, we can go back and forth with these. So I'll start off with brawn. So brawn is I mean, you can imagine what it is. It's brawn. It's literally your muscular build. So it's a combination of D&D's old strength and con for this one. So it's how big and tough your character is, literally how much they can lift and carry, how much endurance that they have. There's a skill that affects that as well. It's how tough and strong your character is. It also is the baseline for how much soak damage they have. We'll get into soak damage shortly. It's how many hits they can take before they go down. Strong and tough. Intellect, you go ahead. Sorry, agility, I meant. Go ahead.
Agility's pretty basic. It's your character's dexterity. For the most part, it'll dictate how good you are with a shot and how, just generally all agility-based skills will be affected that way. Pretty simple.
Mm-hmm. So with intellect, intellect is the base for pretty much all of your knowledge skills. So lore throughout the galaxy, how much you know of like the planets and the societal stuff. It's your ability to gain knowledge relatively quickly. So it's a lot of skills will be based off of that. Like for instance, your medicine and mechanics will be based off of intelligence, but like other things like say streetwise are more of like your cunning skill, which I'll let you jump onto that one.
Yeah, I mean, cunning skill is pretty simple as well. It's kind of just how, according to the book specifically, how devious and crafty and I guess socially apt you end up being sometimes. It says with a high cunning skill, you're savvy and quick to pick up on social and environmental clues. It's how cunning you are. It's pretty self-explanatory as well.
It's kind of funny because cunning is like a combination between D&D's intellect and wisdom, whereas so it's because we lost the Constitution stat, it was melded into brawn and then made partially a skill that broke those 2 mental stats into 3, which was again intellect, cunning, and then brings us to our next power, which is willpower. Willpower is the baseline for your soak. Strain damage. Strain being like
mental.
Again, get to it shortly. Strain being like your how much mental strain or stress or adversity that you can overcome before your character just starts to succumb to it. So willpower also affects a lot of skills. Again, kind of drawing it from D&D's way of doing it, like your vigilance and your discipline. So your character is kind of like your focus, your ability to stay calm under fire, so on and so forth.
And then finally is presence, which is also relatively self-explanatory. You can think of it like charisma in a lot of ways. It's your ability to command attention, to walk into a room and all eyes are on you because you just have such a commanding presence. It's your ability to speak with people with a dominating personality and just how strong of a personality you end up being.
I think it's kind of funny when you select these, you're selecting 6 words to define an entire character. I've actually made my own systems before and stuff like that and blah, blah. But one of the things that you really have to put thought into is choosing these words. So why do they choose presence over charisma? Well, I draw this conclusion from my experience with, like, say, World of Darkness, where you have both your your presence and your force of person. It's multiple stats. Presence is supposed to be literally, you don't necessarily have to be that chatty, talkative, easily flirted with character to have a strong presence.
Yep.
Presence can also be your strong, silent type. You can have a high presence without necessarily being very charismatic.
Jabba the Hutt probably has a commanding presence in a room, but the dude is not exactly a charismatic motherfucker. He is a giant slug. So, yeah, I like that too. I like how you can break it down pretty easily, and you can make a character, like you said, can be strong and silent, but also command the attention of a room.
Absolutely. Hayden Christensen. I mean, Darth Vader doesn't have much charisma, but his presence, I mean, Darth Vader's presence, clearly not Hayden Christensen's, is very prevalent in the series, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's an easy breakdown of those skills. Hopefully you have a better understanding of those. I want to go right down. I'm going to hand this mostly to you, Scott. How do skills work here? Because this is a game where it reminds me a lot of Pathfinder and 3.5, where there's a gigantic skill list of a million different things you can do, but they are fundamentally different in how they work, D&D, compared to Fantasy Flight skill system. So hit me with how the skill system works in the game and how we'll be using it when we play.
Okay, so just to draw the difference in D&D and from this kind of system, in D&D it's very numerical. Like you said, this is propriety dice as opposed to numerical dice. So in D&D, you have like a set DC or difficulty class. To climb that wall, you must beat a 15. So you roll your D20, which it's a 75% chance to roll a 1 through 15. Mm-hmm. 70% chance to roll 1 through 14. If you have no modifiers, 70% chance you're going to fail. Right? If you have modifiers, it makes it easier, whatever. With this, it doesn't matter whether or not you have modifiers, whether if you're rolling 1 die, which we'll get to the dice shortly, or if you're rolling 100 dice, there's still a chance for you to succeed. And there's actually a pretty great chance for you to succeed, depending on how difficult the wall is. It's kind of nifty. So one of the things I love about these dice is it's not just a matter of success versus failure. Did you beat that 15, or did you pull up short and you fail to succeed? It's actually whether or not you succeed and other things that might come of the actions. Like, for instance, you could fail to climb the wall, but because of the way the dice system works, happen to find a cave that gives you a tunnel to get through the area you're trying to get to anyways. Or you succeed in climbing the wall, but pull a bunch of rocks loose that fall down, cause a bit of a landslide that pulls attention from these stormtroopers chasing you to exactly where it is that you are. It's very nifty, and we're going to get into dice again momentarily. But how it is that this is going to be huge in this game is that everybody's going to be able to roll all of these dice. Every character is going to feel as though they have purpose in every situation that they're in. But you're still going to see a very clear cut when, what is it, 420N0 SC0 P.
Krendor's character. You could just say Krendor's character.
That's like such a ridiculous name. Once he starts opening fire with his blaster, it's going to be a very obvious difference from when Maggie does. But when Maggie starts firing her blaster, you'll still be able to see her succeed fairly consistently. I don't know. I think it's one of those things you're going to have to kind of see it in action to see how it plays out. But every character will have significance to them. Everybody rolls at least 1 die. Everybody always has a chance to succeed.
Yeah. So the thing with the skill pool and the skill tree that's also important to note is, like you said, you don't get necessarily a bonus. Everybody can roll everything that they need to do. But if your character is particularly good in a skill, instead of adding a numerical bonus to that roll, what it will do is it will upgrade the type of dice that you're using or add to the amount of dice that you're using. One of the best ways to succeed in the game is to roll more good dice. This
is the difference between raw talent and sharper. And trained skills. So again, once you get to the dice, which we will in a moment, with the raw talent, there's your raw talent, you get these little green dice. It's 8-sided dice. It's your ability dice. Yep. Dice. And the higher ability score that you have, so let's say your agility is a 4 and you're shooting a light ranged weapon, so like a blaster pistol or whatever, you would be able to roll 4 green dice. If you had trained, say, 2 or 3 points into that same skill, those 4 green dice would turn into 2 or 3 yellow dice, 12-sided ones respectively, which are proficiency dice. Correct. These have a much higher rate of success. They also have a higher chance of giving you advantage, which we'll go into momentarily. I keep saying that, but there's just so much to build towards.
Oh yeah, of course.
So you transition to those. But on the flip side of that, though, let's say you're playing a character, like, again, Krendor's character, which has a 1 intelligence. He's not very bright, but he is really good at, I don't know, like astronavigation. So his base is 3, but he ends up putting like 5 trained skills into it. Well, by training that up to 5, he would first convert that first green one into a yellow one, and then with the next point, he would add a green and convert it to a yellow, and so on and so forth. It's something called upgrading, which we're going to get to that again shortly. I keep saying it.
No, it's fine.
So since I keep pushing that back between your raw with ability dice or your proficiency dice, might as well talk about the actual dice themselves at this point.
Sure, so, we'll roll into that real quick. Yeah, let's go through each particular dice type, and then we can go over the symbols as it goes. So we might as well start. Might as well start with the good dice at its base, and then go through the best. And then...
Absolutely, and then we can talk about dice pools and how it is we collect these together. So
do it up.
Okay, there's the green die. It's an 8-sided die. It has little symbols on them. It has 2 symbols that stand out. One of them looks like a little explosion. It's called a success. The number of these that you have add towards whether or not your character succeeds and how successful they are. The other little symbol on it, it looks like a...
They're like wings with a dot in the middle.
Yeah, like wings with a dot, exactly. And that's called an advantage die. So like I said, you could fail at one thing, but have advantage and still find this cave on the other side. So advantage stands for more than just being successful. It's being successful in having the force or just the world and chance itself kind of have an effect on what it is that you're doing. And this can happen with every action, though it's not always monumentous. The next type of dice that you go to is die you go up to is the
proficiency
die, which again, greater chance of having the successes, greater chance of having the advantages, but it also introduces a new symbol. Kind of looks like a lightsaber with like a circle around it, and that symbol is called a triumph die. Now, a triumph die is like an advantage. It's both a success and an advantage, but it also unlocks other things that can happen. You automatically get critical hit. You can make your weapon do special things, so on and so forth. It actually unlocks like a bunch of nifty things that can happen. These are relatively rare, but you will see them pop up from time to time. The only other big good die that you're going to see very often, it's called a boost die. So a boost die is a little blue one. If I remember correctly, it's like 3 sides are blank.
I think 4 sides are blank, actually.
Or 4 sides are blank. And then there's like 1 success and then one that has 2 successes. And it's like, oh, this is nifty. I get to add something to my character, but 66% of the time doesn't really do anything. Boost die, you're going to see very often getting kind of handed out for various situations. They will have an effect a third of the time. It's pretty good numbers, right?
Then with all the light, there's a dark.
Yep, exactly. Balance to the force, right?
Exactly.
So first thing is going to be so that was a 6-sided die. So the first thing is going to be your purple die, which is the difficulty dice. Now this mirrors exactly the ability die, the green ability die, both 8-sided, but your symbols are slightly different. So first thing that you're going to come across is your failure. Now failure comes in the shape of, it almost looks like a Death Star symbol.
I think it's like the Empire gear.
Yeah, that's right. The Empire gear.
Yeah.
It's the Empire gear. So as you roll your dice, your successes and your failures, they kind of neutralize each other. And if you have more failures than successes, you fail. It's plain and simple. That is what's going to be on your 8-sided die. On your also on your 8-sided die, you're going to introduce something called a
disadvantage.
It's not disadvantage. It's setback or something like that, right?
Oh, I thought it was just disadvantage, but you might be right. I'll take a look.
Challenge. It's actually challenge.
Got it.
Yep. So it's going to introduce something called challenge. Now this symbol looks a little bit like, I'm so bad at memorizing. Like when I see the symbols, I know what they are. This one looks kind of like a failure symbol, which is the triangle. Oh no, sorry. Failure is the triangle, the circle around it, and disadvantage or setback is like kind of like the gear of the Empire. Now that symbol does the exact opposite that advantage does. When that happens, things like your critical hit can be neutralized, bad things can happen. Like I said, you succeeded in climbing the cliff, but yet you knocked rocks loose, hold attention over to where you are. It's when, again, the force is kind of working against you in the favor of those that you're opposing. It's chance. So even when you succeed, it doesn't necessarily mean everything is hunky-dory. Also, with the 8-sided dice that upgrades to something called challenge dice. These are red 12-sided dice. So it has those same things with a greater chance of succeeding at making your life difficult. But it also introduces something new. It's despair. So the despair symbol, which I honestly have no clue what it looks like because I hope to never see it.
Yeah.
The despair symbol is
It's like a hollow triangle with a circle around it.
Oh, okay. I keep describing things poorly because I don't have them memorized, but I know what they are when I see them. And I'm pretty sure Mathis is going to throw up little pictures so you can see what they are anyways. So moving on, the despair is the exact opposite of the triumph. This is when really negative things will happen, whether or not you succeed at what you're doing. So one of the examples I like to give is like, let's say you're trying to get away from Kylo Ren chasing you through some Star Destroyer. And as you're blasting your way past these stormtroopers or, Kylo Ren's little minions there, you may have succeeded in killing his men, but at the same time, one of your stray blaster shots hit the panel that controlled the blast door behind them and sealed the door shut. Now you have to spend time in trying to rewire this thing, reroute power and opening it, but all the while Kylo Ren's coming for you. You know what I mean? It's like, sure, you succeeded, but some bad stuff is happening. And then that goes into the next die, which is the smallest one, the 6-sided one. That one is actually called a setback die. And again, I'm pretty sure 4 sides have nothing on it. One side has 1 failure, and then one side has 2 failures on it. So rarely has a situation, but a third of the time is pretty crappy if it comes against you, right?
Yep.
Setback die are, again, very often you'll see.
Exactly.
And so that brings us to dice pool. If you, the die pool or the handful of dice that you get to roll, if you want to set that one up, Mathis.
Yeah, so basically when you are going to be doing anything in the game, whether it be a challenge or try to attack, usually, as an example in D&D, in combat, if you're trying to hit somebody, you're rolling a d20 and adding like your weapon's bonus plus your stat bonus and trying to overcome a hard number. Say their armor class is an 18, you hope that what you roll plus your bonuses will equal or be greater than 18. Then that's it, you hit the person. In this game, it's less about that and more about creating a dice pool that you will roll, and then the results will determine whether you succeed or fail. So if you're trying to shoot a stormtrooper, for instance, you're going to take all the stats and the bonuses that will give you dice. So like, say you're shooting a pistol, ranged light will give you like a couple green dice. And your abilities and whatnot will give you your dice pool. And then if it's I think a normal difficulty challenge, the DM will then throw in 2 purple dice into that dice pool. And then the player takes that dice pool and rolls it. And then you compare successes and failures. And whatever has more will determine whether or not you hit that stormtrooper, for instance.
Without overcomplicating it, just to get a little more specific, if it's melee, it's always 2 purple dice. If it's ranged, it's based off of how close or far you are and the type of weapon you're using. But in general, the closer you are, the less dice. The further you are, the more dice being rolled against. You're rolling with to set you back to make things more difficult. So if it's like extreme distances, you're actually rolling 4 purple dice against you, as well as whatever potential setbacks and so on and so forth that could be happening. So to give a perfect example, if you're shooting at, I believe it's short range or medium range, so medium range is 2 setback dice, difficulty dice. So if we have Krendor with his droid is firing his heavy blaster, he actually gets to roll 2 proficiency and 2 ability dice. That's 2 yellows and 2 greens. But at the same time, he spent a moment to aim at his target beforehand. So he adds in one of the blue dice, a boost die. So he has 5 die working in his favor. However, the target he's trying to shoot at is at medium range. So he adds in 2 of the difficulty dice. So 2 purple ones that will try to counter his successes from his pool of good dice. But then that person also happens to have cover. So that adds 1 more die into it. Right. He rolls this big pool of dice out. We're doing it digitally, but effectively rolls this big pool of dice out, and he adds up how many successes versus how many failures, how many advantages versus how many disadvantages or whatever they're called.
Yeah, and they can't. Those also cancel each other out. By the way,
they completely cancel each other out. Exactly. So now, if his successes equal and beat his failures by 1, then he succeeds.
Yep.
For every additional success he has, he succeeds better. So
does like 1 for combat. I think it does like 1 bonus damage per additional success
for
plus
combat,
his weapon,
exactly.
Plus his weapon damage.
Exactly. And then flip side, if they cancel each other out and failures happens, then he fails, and to a degree. And then the same thing will go with advantage and disadvantage, how they cancel each other out and how much he gets to build up after that.
Yep.
The things that never cancel each other out are triumph and despair. They can both happen simultaneously without canceling each other out. Though despair, again, you'll see far more rare than you will triumph, especially if it's Krendor shooting his blaster.
The one thing he's good at.
Yeah.
Like I said, just to reiterate, I firmly believe this system is not that difficult to understand. The real difficulty is just remembering what the symbols do, which, again, you should hopefully have a good idea by now. And I think the system does a great job at representing...
You really don't even have to worry about it because it's all going to be displayed nice and easy for you.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Format. Nice and
exactly. The game does such a great job at like representing the dark and the light side of the force always working against one another. So we've gone over the basic dice, the most important, the dice you're going to see the most in the game, the thing you will see every session without fail. But there's one more die that is a lot rarer that we will see at the beginning of every game for creating a different pool, and that is the force dice. So the force, unlike in the old Star Wars RPG system, this one takes place during the Empire. This is a rule. So force-sensitive people almost never exist, and those that do are typically hunted and killed by the Empire. So there's no real, like, Jedi class, unless you get to the Force and Destiny book, but even then, they're much, much less powerful than they used to be in the old system. But the Force still exists, and everybody, every living thing touches the Force. And that's what the Force die is for, and what the Destiny pool is for. So I'm going to hand it to you, Scott. What is the Force dice, and what is the Destiny pool? Go.
So the force die, everybody gets to roll at the beginning of the session, and it tells us how many light side and how many dark side points are going to be able to be available right at the beginning of the game. So what are light side and dark side points? The light side points are a pool of points that the whole party gets to use the force in their favor. It could be things to upgrade their dice, to turn a green 8-sided into a yellow 12-sided, or if it's already yellow 12-sided, add an additional green 8-sided to whatever check they're doing. They could also use it to downgrade an opponent's roll, more or less adding, taking a purple die and turning it into a red 12-sided, or adding an additional purple if it's already all red 12-sided ones. So it's using the force in their favor. They can choose to do so as a metagame choice, the force kind of helping them out. On the flip side of that, the DM can do the same exact thing, or storyteller, whatever you want to call it, can do the same exact thing, but it's the dark side points. So every time the party uses light side points, every time the DM uses dark side points, they move back and forth. Draw it clear. Game starts, we all roll. There's 2 dark side points and 5 light side points, because just how it worked out. Half an hour into the session, Maggie decides she really needs to convince somebody to reduce the cost of blah. She uses a force points to upgrade her die pool, makes it happen. The party now only has 4 light side points available to them, but suddenly the DM has 3 available to them. The total pool of 6 is still there, or was it 6 or 7? Sorry, 7. The total pool of 7 is still there, but now it's kind of flowing. 5 minutes after that, a battle breaks out, and Jesse decides that the Wookiee needs to rip somebody's head off. He uses another point, and then bam, we go to they now have 3, I have 4, and as I do it, it goes back to them, so on and so forth. This is a way for them to use the force, and for me to use the force with like an ebb and flow to keep things moving, to keep the story exciting, to keep things difficult, or to make it easy. One of the other nifty things that you can use the force for, and this is one of the reasons why it's called Destiny points, because as opposed to force points, is because, well, droids can use them. We all know droids are part of the force. If there's a Yusong Vong, they can use them. They're completely disconnected from the force. But it's also, you can do other nifty things too. It's one of my favorite ones. You can actually use it to put narrative into the story. So we all know that in this game, you control your character. You can control everything that they do, so on and so forth, within the allowance of the game master. The game master pretty much just controls everything. This is a way that you can be like, oh, crap, oh, man. The example in the book was literally, you landed on a planet that you expected to have a breathable atmosphere, but there was a leak at a local factory mining, blah, and now the air is very toxic. So you might be able to survive there a short period of time, but then it becomes dangerous. And literally, Mathis's character goes, oh, I found some breathers or some atmospheric blah, blah, blahs. On the last place I grabbed them up pretty cheap. Spend a force point or destiny points. And if I allow it, which most of the time I will, I'll go, oh, cool, you have that. Thank you for the dark side point. I'm totally going to screw you with this later on.
Right.
And back and forth with the flow of the game. So it's pretty exciting how it goes. Again, you only roll it at the beginning, and then you see how it affects the rest of the session as we go.
Yeah, and the important thing too, is that destiny pool doesn't roll over to the next session. When the session is over, the destiny points are gone. In the beginning of next session, we all re-roll, and we have a whole new pool to represent a whole new session, new story to be told. Which again, it just really feeds into the idea that this is a more narrative-driven game with mechanics as its underlying, as opposed to a mechanical-driven game with story as its underlying feature.
I'm just excited for the first session. We start up and it's all dark side points.
That'd be hilarious.
I'm just like, you guys are screwed.
Oh, that'd be so bad.
Let's do this. And the last thing I want to get touching on these destiny points and how the force has its back and forth with light side, dark side, is the book even suggests, if you notice that your party is, your PCs are hoarding these points to make sure that you can't get them because you spent yours and they're holding on to theirs. One of the things they want you to do is make their lives miserable. So you kind of force them to do it because the much like the spice, the force is designed to flow, right? Sorry, wrong world again. So
Jesse will be flowing through some spice on his own.
Yes, he certainly will. Of course. He'll get the crystal blue eyes and everything. So you want to make it flow back and forth. It actually disrupts the feeling of the game if either side are holding on to these instead of using them. It makes it more exciting when they're constantly being used. So, and then while finishing up the conversation about dice in general, one of the things that I have to say are a huge complaint I have about the system, probably the only real complaint I have about the system, is that one of the things I do as a DM is I kind of hold my hand. So in fact, somebody recently asked inside the Reddit, why isn't it we can't see NPC health bars? Well, you usually pre-establish health bars that I have there for a reason, but sometimes for narrative purposes, I'll make them smaller or larger throughout the combat to help tell a story. Because that's what we're doing. We're enjoying an adventure. We're telling a story. We're not throwing algorithms at each other and hoping that mine's better, right? It's not number crunch. One of the things about this game is that, well, you always know how good I am at one thing or how bad I am at one thing because you always know what disadvantages I'm throwing at you because I don't have a set number for you to overcome and this number's shrouded and hidden by the dark side. You literally have a handful of dice that I tell you have to roll.
Yeah.
Attack this opponent. So you always know how difficult the challenge is. So let's say, for instance, Maggie tries to do something, pick a lock and it fails and there's a zap because a trap went off or whatever it is. And she's like, God damn it. But she only rolled one purple. Well, in a different system, you might be like, oh, I failed. Let's not even try that again. That was painful. But now you have that meta knowledge of it was one purple die. I'm totally going to try again.
However, I will throw at you in that particular example. What you could do is like, oh, you actually bungled the system. Now it's even harder for you to do it. Now it's going to be two purple because you effed up the wiring or whatever.
Only if you rolled the disadvantages or whatever. I can't do that just for straight failure.
Oh, why not? Go for it.
I'm not that big of a douche.
Yeah, I am, I guess. I know, exactly. Depends on the day we catch you. But I agree. That is a downside of it. But at the same time, too, D&D is similar in that, like, it's like, oh, I failed at a 14, but but you hit him on a 16, so we know he's at least a 15 to hit, like in combat at least.
It takes some time to get there, though. It's not the first attack.
True.
Time to draw this out.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So again, that's my only big gripe about the game, and that's kind of like how the pools of dice work in general. But then let's give some more examples of where this comes in. So I suppose, talk about combat.
All right, you're going to notice a jump cut there. Apologies, had to take care of something. Anyway, so basically, now that the dice is out of the way, which is part one of really understanding how this rule system works, the other thing we want to tackle, the other thing that I consider a little amorphous until you've read the book and kind of understand what's going on, is combat, how combat works, the types of damage you can take, because in D&D, again, it's very simple. There's a grid that you use. Each square represents 5 feet. Your character can only move a certain amount of feet per turn, and there's certain actions you can take, and then that's it. The combat is over. Again, Star Wars is a little bit more, I guess vague is the word I would use. It's more based around storytelling. And we're going to throw it to Scott to talk about how combat works in this game, and then we'll talk the details of combat after that.
Yep. Okay. So with the flow of the game, just like in D&D, there's like the storytelling flow, which happens outside of combat. Then there's the more, okay, every second needs to be counted flow of the game, which is when you roll initiative and so on. Now, rounds in this game, in D&D, a round is 6 seconds. So each character has about 6 seconds to do their actions. They all happen simultaneously, but don't really happen simultaneously. As you see, decisions are made based off the end of this person's actions, which are happening simultaneously while you're making these actions. But in theory, they all happen simultaneously. You guys just move fluidly together. If you've played KOTOR, you've seen plot out the moves and unpause and let it go.
Yep.
So turns in this one actually don't work in 6 seconds. They're about a minute. It's actually about as long as is needed to accomplish all of the tasks at hand, but give or take a minute or so. And with that being said, like you can imagine, there's so much more freedom that can be done within this minute. However, within the confines of the game. So sure, in D&D in a minute, you could run 800 feet. In this game, you might not necessarily be able to run 800 feet in that minute because you're taking blaster fire or going around heavy terrain or whatever the case may be the entire time. So it's kind of like the other unmentioned story elements will slow it down or bring it so it's not so, well, it's 10 rounds of combat. So moving on. Combat, your turn, breaks down into two things. It's maneuvers and actions. So maneuvers, you have one of these for free every round. A maneuver is, and just reading it straight from the book, you could do things like aiming a weapon. You can move, so like actual movements, closer or further from people, open doors or manipulate objects, whatever, stand up or lie down, diving behind cover, literally diving behind cover. These are all the kind of things that you can do as a free maneuver. If you want to take two maneuvers, you can easily do so for one of two ways, as well as character abilities you get later on, whatever. You can accept 2 strain, which you get to momentarily. You can accept 2 strain to have a second maneuver, or you can convert your action into a maneuver for free. Now, no matter how it is you gain extra maneuvers, you can never have more than 2. That's it, 2, you're done. Now, what you can do with your second maneuver, you could say if you're moving, move even further. If you're aiming, aim a little bit better. Do 2 separate things. You dive behind cover and then aim and shoot, whatever the case may be. Actions, however, are like the more meaty part of your turn. This is going to be when you're actually firing your weapon, you're making your skill check to pick the lock to slice a terminal, or you're actually doing the difficult part of it, again, the meaty part of your turn. Actions, you're going to get one of those. There might be some abilities throughout the game that give you like action-seeming actions, so things that like, oh, you can make an additional attack. It's not a true open action for you to do whatever you want. It's just you can make an additional attack, which can, of course, be converted into maneuvers I already went over. So with these actions, you can make your attacks. The way combat works, as we went over explaining 1,000 times, a Krendor firing is heavy blaster. You get your big pool of dice. You roll. You do your damage. Krendor's blaster, I believe, does 12 because of like modifications he has to it. 12 plus additional successes. So let's say he has a set of dice and he rolls it, and he rolls 14. He rolls 4 successes. So he has 12 plus 3 additional is 15 points of damage. How does that apply to the actual target? Well, the target has something called soak and wounds, and then they have their wound threshold, which is the maximum amount of wounds that they can take. So soak is like their ability to ignore a hit, whether it be because like the armor that they're wearing or the just like how good the character is, like how tough they are. Again, brawn is one of the things that define this. Let's say he's going against some Imperial trooper that happens to have a soak of 10. That's a pretty big soak. So he shoots him for 15 points of damage. 10 of those damage are just completely ignored, just flushed away like damage resistance or damage reduction, as you would see in other systems. The other 5 actually gets applied to their wounds. It's actual damage that goes through and hits the target. As you can imagine, your pool of wound is not very big. How many blaster hits can you actually take before you die? How many stabs from a lightsaber before you die?
1.
So, what?
1. That's the 1 stab. I'm just joking. I'm making a joke.
Yeah. I got it. It's okay. Calm down, Mike. So anyways, so the so you, what is it? You, after the soak is gone, you take the wounds. Once your wounds accrues to your wounds threshold, that's when you start taking something. So again, your wound threshold being, let's say it's 10. So after that, same exact Stormtrooper gets hit with the same exact blaster, same exact damage twice. From that point on, anytime they take a hit, they take something called a critical hit or a critical injury. There's literally a table that we roll on to see what the negative effects are. So it could be things like you literally blasted off their hands. They no longer have that hand. Results ensue. You blasted through their leg. They can no longer use it. They have to use stuff to hold themselves up. People have to help them walk. It could be things like you knock them unconscious, or, and even a more rare scenario when you're dealing with PCs, they die. We could actually just hit them with so much damage that they eventually die. The system is built in such a way to make it difficult for them to die. Nitty-gritty doesn't matter, but it can happen.
Yeah.
So on the flip side of that, that is your soak and your wounds. Then you actually with your wound threshold. Then you have something called strain. Now, strain is things that are difficult for your character, mentally or physically exhausting, without necessarily harming them. There's a big difference between, oh no, I fell off a cliff for 30 meters and somehow survived, and oh, I jumped out of the way last minute from the speeder and I pulled a muscle, but luckily it didn't hit me.
Yeah.
So how it is that you can get strain? One of them is you want the extra free maneuver. Gain 2 strain because you really pushed yourself. There are certain abilities that are available even at character creation. I don't believe he took up a Krendor had the option of having something called dodge. He could take a strain, which would add to his defense. Defense being how difficult it is to hit him. I'm going to go into that a little bit further in one more second. So he could take strain damage to add to his defense. More or less his character put a little bit, he worked those gears a little hard, maybe pulled a couple wires, whatever, to get out of the way. Strain is something that's easily recovered for your character, whereas wounds takes a lot more to recover. It's literally healing damage. Once you go past your strain threshold, once you hit your strain threshold, anything beyond that becomes wounds damage. It's your character's done.
Once you max out on your wounds, you just go unconscious, is what happens. What I was saying is, once you hit your wound threshold, you take 1 critical injury and you go unconscious, and that's it. So, okay. And then with mental strain, with your strain threshold, once you hit max on that, you are incapacitated. Whether that means you're unconscious or you're just in a daze, basically you're just incapacitated. You're mentally exhausted. You can't do anything.
Did you say that on camera?
No, I am saying it right now.
So is this being recorded to show them?
Yep, now it is.
Hi, them.
So that's that. It's pretty simple, and the table that Scott was talking about earlier. I mean, it's pretty big. It's very death is at the very, very bottom here, and there's all this that can.
That's
happen.
the nitty gritty. That's the nitty gritty.
No, I know. I'm not going into the nitty gritty. I'm just saying, there's a huge table there that you'll see as wounds happen to our players. As I'm sure.
No, it's fine. You will spend most of your time in the nitty gritty.
Yes, that is correct.
You always blast the mechanic. If you don't want them to survive and to get away from the dogfight,
why would you blast the mechanic?
You take out the astromech, the astromech droid first, so they can't fix the ship, right?
They can still fix it. It's just they help.
You're gonna have a much harder time jumping to light speed without something doing the calculations for you.
Yeah.
So that was the strain,
wound,
and all that stuff. So just a tad more touch on defense. As we said, medium range, shooting a blaster is 2 purple dice that go into it. There are things like diving behind cover that can increase your defense, which more or less adds a die to it. There are other abilities that can add that as well. Again, I just say Krendor can you grab the dodge ability and use strain to, against this particular attack, increase his defense, making it so that any attacks against him will have an additional purple die thrown into that person's set that they're rolling against him. So there are a few different ways that you can increase your defense. Defense breaks down into 2 areas, melee and ranged. You're hiding behind a crate. That's wonderful against blaster fire. That doesn't really help you against the guy that's standing next to you with the vibro axe. You know what I mean? So defense breaks down to melee and ranged defense, which just adds to how hard it is or what the die pool is of setback dice or negative dice being rolled in the attack.
Pretty simple.
And I think the next thing that we wanted to go over, or the last thing we wanted to go over, is experience points, how they're obtained and what they do. You're awarded experience points at the character creation. So when the character is first created, you have a pool to be given. I believe humans have like 100 or 110 or whatever it is, and droids have 175, and every race has a different amount because not all races are created equal. So if there's a race that's more powerful, they give it less experience points. If it's a race that's weaker, droids, they give it a lot more to allow for balance in the game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And droids specifically, they also do it for, making them seem a lot more customizable. Moving on. The other way they get experience is at the end of every session, you get, I believe it's 5 experience points at the end of each session. Now, that number can be increased or decreased based off of whether or not you've actually set out and achieved the objectives that you were attempting to achieve, whether or not your, or what are they called? Your obligations and your like moral stuffs, whatever the other side of that is, are play into the game and how much they play into the game. Experience isn't necessarily always handed out evenly. So whereas I might just have the blanket rule, everybody gets 5 XP every session, yay. If Krendor really steps up his game and has, why do I keep saying Krendor? Screw Krendor. Okay. And fuck Mathis too.
Hey, come on.
If Maggie really steps up her game and she has, like, every time a combat encounter comes around, she talks the party out of it. Every time something comes across, she's just exceedingly successful, not because of the dice rolling well, but because her approach to the situation, her really playing her character and how that character would do things very well. And that's despite the fact that her obligation came in and threw a huge curveball. She just led the way and handled it beautifully and so on. Not as necessarily the party leader, just her way of playing this character. If I'm just like, holy crap, Maggie did an amazing job, I could award her 2 extra experience points. Like, hey, Maggie, you really crushed it. That's amazing. And these aren't something that's we looked on and resented by the other party members. It's supposed to be like a big pat on the back and like I want to try to get that next time. Now, this isn't something that's necessarily handed out every session or whatever the case may be. But if Mathis comes to the game and he plays the way he typically does, and it's very lackluster and boring, it's nobody's entertaining, it's lots of comments talking about how terrible he is.
Yeah, of course.
And whatnot, and how Thunkmon's trying to corrupt poor Addo and whatnot. Then we could pull experience away to kind of like slow down his progression and allow him to fall into just the back noise. Forget about him.
So what you're saying is the DM can use experience to punish.
Well, that just sounds terrible. But
because it is.
In a way, if the PC is really not bringing it to the session, if they're, it's one of those, not because you rolled poorly, but if you're really just causing more hindrances than helping, and not because you're playing your character, if you're causing hindrances just because you're playing poorly, these are things where you can apply negatives. I tend to be very, 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 very forgiving about stuff like that for the sense of I'm not going to give you experience points. But that's just because the modern player's mentality is everybody should be even. It's something that started with 3.0. And if you're an old school gamer and you know that it used to be like 900 XP for a bard to level 6 times versus the 18,000 XP for a wizard to level once, you know what I'm talking about. These bastards. Gandalf isn't the same as Pippin, okay?
And that really boils down to how just characters are different in the game in general. There's no, in Star Wars, there's no levels. You don't level up. It's all buying. So if you want to buy a point in one of your skills, it's typically 5 times the rank in which you're buying. So if you want your 3rd skill point, it's 5 times 3, 15 experience to buy the next rank in one of the skills that you is one of your career skills. So it's more, again, much like the game, it's a lot more fluid and malleable than something hard like D&D, which is like, you level, this is what you get every level, the end. And that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's everything has their own value and everything has their own different tiers, if it even tiers up, and you buy them as you choose to as you go. You don't just, like you said, you were a level 1 wizard. Now you're a level 2 wizard. Right. Here are these abilities. Oh, you can choose your spells if you'd like.
Yeah, exactly.
No, here's your abilities. Everybody's the same.
Yep.
It is completely customizable. It's wonderful. It reminds me of a bunch of video games I used to play back in the day where literally everything was customizable, which is awesome, as opposed to, again, you level, here are your abilities.
So. The only thing that's not so customizable, which I think we may have touched on at the beginning, is your base abilities. Your ability scores that are dictated by your race can only be adjusted at character creation or by a very late game talent that you can pick up in your class. Other than that, you can't spend experience points beyond character creation.
Really good items Just saying.
And like what be magic items, quote unquote. But yeah,
Oh, techie, like
techie, cybernetic implants, that kind of thing.
Like Darth Vader wasn't strong, but now he has robotic arms.
So now he's super strong.
Yeah.
But yeah, but that's it. Like, other than that, everything about your character is customizable in almost every single way. And I think that's the basics. Again, there's a lot of details with any RPG system you can go into. And if you're interested, I highly encourage you to at least pick up one of the core rule books. There are 3 core rule books. They all work with one another. They all go over the same rules. And if you're looking to play this with your friends, all you need is 1 core rule book. That's it, period. And that, Edge of the Empire is what we're going to be playing mostly. We may, for one reason or another, dip into the extended stuff with the Age of Rebellion and whatnot if we end up going down that route. But that's it. That's the rules. I hope this was helpful to you.
But that's only because off camera, the droid kept begging to have force powers. Like,
He wanted to be general.
I want to be a Jedi droid. Come on, I want to be a Jedi droid.
Crendor did not do that.
And Maggie wanted to be a Jedi Jawa. I was like, what?
Those people are going to believe you. So that's it. What? They should, because you're the DM. That's why they should. But I hope this was helpful. Honestly, like for me, it was actually doing this video was super helpful as well. There's a lot I knew, but some of the details, like how combat worked, was actually nice to go over it, and it's pretty simple. We will be playing this Thursday at 6 p.m. PST. This video will be going live before then. What day? I'll figure that out as soon as this video's over. Scott,
there's a lot of editing that you're gonna have to do.
I am gonna have to do a lot of fucking editing.
Well, I mean, you kept having your cat attack your face.
Yeah. If only it was just your headphones that went out, it'd be so much easier.
What? No, that didn't happen. No. Stupid cats.
Thank you, Scott, for jumping on this video with me and going over the rules. I hope you're excited, Scott, for this rule system.
Of course,
absolutely. It's going to be awesome. And we'll see.
You tried to get me to play it years ago, so
yeah, of course. Nice, but anything Star Wars, I want to play with you. So
yeah.
I did it. Yep. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you on Thursday. Twitch.tv/Lost Initiative Show. Bye-bye.
Bye.